Hello, welcome to a discussion on the topic religion and human rights. So, before we begin, let us understand what is human right. Well, we can say that human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, whatever our nationality, place of residence, sex, origin, color, creed, religion or language. We are all equally entitled to our human rights without discrimination. These rights are interrelated, interdependent and indivisible. Human right is a result of modernization. We can say that human rights as a theme may be regarded as a cultural product of modernity. The origin of the human rights theme has gained general consent in almost all disciplines like philosophy, human sciences, law, polity and international relations. It is agreed by various scholars that there are three main points to keep in mind while defining human rights. These points are to be chronologically explained as the first is the sphere of philosophy, the second is that of politics and thirdly that of religion. Well, now the first philosophers to explain human rights as co-natural rights of each human were Enlightenment philosophers like John Locke, Rousseau, Kant and Montesquieu. Duffer is of the view that these rights cannot be destroyed by any political or state authority as it were considered to be the expression of age-old universal innate values that was possessed by each individual. After Enlightenment, this theme started expanding and growing and including other disciplines, which was due to obvious political and historical reasons. Let us now discuss the political origins of human rights. The political origins of human rights are related to the glorious revolution in the United Kingdom in 1688 and to the formation of a new nation, the United States of America in 1776. It was Jeremy Waldron who proposed a historical reconstruction in 1987 that human rights at earlier times were the moral and political flag hosted by the colonialists of New England against their own mother country and are seen as the minority rights. Accordingly, the same could be applied to the political origins of the French Revolution. The interests and the expectations of the emerging social class were similar to that of the human rights that the intellectuals and revolutionaries spoke of. This relation between human rights and the political action brought doubts over their universality. This claim of universality was backed by the 18th century liberal philosophical thought. There were thinkers like Marx, Bentham and Burke who were habituated in criticizing the universality of human rights. For Marx, those who invoked to human rights did so in order to protect their own minority or social rights. Hence, Susan Mendes is of the view that human rights are basically just a cover of ideology for the right to egoism. While writing on the theme of human rights on the Jewish question, Marx looks on to the issue through the concept of emancipation in regards to the German Jews' desire of full citizenship. I shall here quote his words in the starting pages of this essay. He writes that the German Jews desired emancipation. What kind of emancipation do they desire? Civic, political emancipation. Bruno Bauer in his reply says that no one in Germany is politically emancipated. He also raised this issue that we ourselves are not free. So how are we to free others? Bruno Bauer noticed that the desire of the Jews was quite antonymous because at that time state religion was Christianity. He wondered that in what name they claim such full human rights and citizenship when their demand is in an open conflict with the state religion. According to Marx, the main problem was not limited to a particular minority, but the emancipation of all individuals who were oppressed by different forms of domination, whether economic or political. Hence, his opinion was that the most rigid form of the opposition between the Jew and the Christian is the religious opposition. It was impossible to resolve the opposition. Only the way was to abolish religion. Marx also believed that man was never free. He was of the view that even if man lives in a free state, he is not a free man. He concludes that the political emancipation cannot be created without its being human emancipation at the same time. Marx was not convinced by the fact that human right is a natural or universal right, because in this man will be considered as an abstraction, in that he is a part of a political community. However, when in the civil society he should be actually considered as a concrete individual. Now, let us look into the religious origins of human rights. Again, I shall discuss that Marx believed man is not free even in a free state. He believes that man achieves full rights when he is free from limitations. For this achievement of full rights, he has to be free from religion too. However, this is complete contrast from what the scholars who see in religion the origin of human rights think. George Jelinek, a positivist scholar, in his work The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, writes that it was at the time of American Revolution that the first human rights were declared, and this also became the base for that of the French Revolution. Accordingly, the cultural origins of the Declaration are religious in nature. Ernst Troels and Max Weber took up this thesis. Ernst Troels ascribed George Jelinek, while writing on Jelinek's demise, the merit of linking the origin of human rights to Protestant sects, especially Baptist and Quaker and some other Calvinist formation. Weber also acknowledged his debt to Jelinek for the formulation of his fundamental thesis, The Protestant Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism. Well, let us move forward to discuss the origin of human rights as an object of sociological inquiry. Well, the debate on human rights shows us how it came to be an object of sociological inquiry, especially for the sociology of religion. For this, there are basically two reasons. Firstly, when we are discussing on the issue of human rights, we are actually inquiring one of the most distinct contradiction in our present modern society. Accordingly, on one hand, the freedom of the individual is of utmost importance in any modern society. On the other, the modern society also seeks respect and recognition of a universal ethical and juridical principle. In 1997, Turin has observed that in the process of modernization, tension is unavoidable. Sociologically, when we talk about human rights, we tend to question that if there is something at a higher level than particular interest that could bring people together and form a society. Well, Durkheim was thinking over this point only when he discovered the sacred and its social function. The self-created social norms and values turn into God for us independent of our will. Hence, every society has to believe in the universal norm and values that speaks the language of ethics. So, this is why human right is of interest to sociologists, because it returns to the question of the relationship between ethics and society. Accordingly, the sacred and society. Secondly, human rights may indicate a type of conflict which could be a conflict of values and which has been present in the history of human society. In that, it may relate to the acts of divine will and not be related to interest or utilitarian function of man's life. If we see the case of American Puritans, we can see that they did not expect state to assure freedom and belief, but instead that the state would not interfere with God's plan that had been given to them for creating a sacred community like heaven on earth. Viola believes that this led them to a want for a light state that was neutral to other religion and respectful of the principle of moral self-determination that man requires in order to achieve his goals in life. Here we can see why human rights are of interest to sociologists of religious study. Human rights is on high interest to religion sociologists because the source of these goals is the system of religious belief. Let us now analyze the types of socio-religious conflicts that can be traced to the question of human rights. When a religion presents itself as a whole system of belief, a system that looks forward to trace the path to salvation and also lay the foundation of social order. Human rights as an issue arises. This corresponds to the ideas of law of God. So, what is the law of God? Here, law is the higher order put up by God that man cannot ignore. This is applicable to Judaism and Islam, less to Christianity. Religions like Judaism, Islam, and to some extent Hinduism are of the view that there exists a changeless, eternal law that is made by God or preserved in the cosmic order, and that man has to obey them. This idea is further conveyed by prophets and saints who have learned them through holy scripts like the Veda. This result for the type of social action aimed at fellows. However, there are certain problems that arise. Firstly, how are beliefs formed in the existence of law? What social processes and historical ones do lead to the forming of these norms by man? Secondly, the relationship between the higher authority who preserves and proclaims the law, content, and those who follow and obey them. And lastly, the consequences when the tension between individual freedom to believe and submission to the principles of obeying the religious authority reached to the highest breaking point. When groups and movements of believers protest in the name of human rights that are universal. The first question concerns the complicated relationship between the sayings of a prophet and the process of arranging and understanding what these words mean. This task is usually done by the disciples. Well, the whole process from when the saint says something to the writing down of the script of what he has meant by that, and then to pass it on to followers who regard it as a holy script can be measured by time passage and the obstacles and problems faced by those sorting out what is to be written out of what the prophet has said. This process is of interest to religion sociologists because the comparative study of religion shows that whenever a system of norms is being constructed, it often results in a complicated negotiation, conflicts and different viewpoints in a religious community. The second question concerns the relation of power between the followers and the authority. Here, basically, it is the division of labor between clerics, that is the prophets and priests, and the laymen, that is the disciples, that we are talking about. This is found in parts of Christianity, Islam, and also in Hinduism. In the case of Hindus, we can take the Brahmins and lower caste for example. This question concerns with the sociological aspects. To understand it better and make it clearer, we shall take an example which concerns the religion of the Muslims, and we shall see that it is by no means confined to it. As mentioned earlier, let us now discuss human rights in the case of Islam. Well, if we carefully observe the documents on human rights, drafted by the Muslims in the last 20 years of the 20th century, we will see that there is a single obstacle that prevents a complete and total adhesion by Islam to the modern culture of human rights. In 1948, Afghanistan and Iran and other Muslim countries were signatories to the UN Declaration of Human Rights. It was only Saudi Arabia that did not vote, even though attached to the UDHR, some Muslim countries started to criticize for its failure to consider the cultural and religious context of non-Western countries. Iran refused to implement the declaration as it did not reflect Islamic law. Let us now discuss about the Cairo Declaration of 1990. The Cairo Declaration of 1990 is the most recent charter of the rights issued by countries with a Muslim tradition. It contains the Articles 24 and 25 that if human rights are in conflict with Quranic law, the Quranic law will prevail. It refers to an absolute law revealed by God. Human rights are not independently formed in contrast to the rights of God. The reason for this is thus, according to Islam, man is born with a natural disposition to Islam and to believe in one God. Well, the Muslims lack the freedom to change religion because according to them, freedom of religion is not human right but a form of evil. It is considered as an offense as those who leave the religion also leave the community of the Ummah. Hence, when one leaves his religion, he also is rejecting the divine as well as an act of insubordination. We can say that the case of abandonment of belief makes a good point of observation from which to view the problems faced by the Muslim world in accepting human rights fully. However, in Muslim countries with wider exposure to freedom of ideas, attention has given to the issue of human rights. In countries like Tunisia, Egypt and Morocco, leagues and organizations for the defense of human rights were set up until the arrival of new wave of radical movements. We can say that the Declaration of Cairo of 1990 was a sign of twofold recognition. The moral authority of the United Nations lies on one hand and defense of the human rights claims by the social movements. The end of a lengthy tangled journey is represented by the declaration that took more than 10 years to draft. The declaration was a result of negotiation between the leaders of the Quranic law and those who were liberal about their interpretation in a modern way. Positive law that was set up in many Muslim countries that grew along with norms founded in Sharia. Now, let us take polygamy as an example. Well, Habib Bourguiba abolished polygamy in Tunisia in 1956. While he did so, he gave two reasons. The first reason, he based it on a passage of Quran that talks about polygamy itself. The other reason he gives is a practical one. According to him, the Prophet himself had urged men to marry only one if he cannot treat all wives equally. He saw the need for Tunisia to modernize, and it would not be logical to think that man will be able to respect the Quranic precept of treating more than one wife equally, especially on economic grounds. Accordingly, this led to the emancipation of women in Tunisia, unlike other Muslim countries. The age of marriage was increased, the women were being given the right to education. Eventually, the conditions of women improved. Presently, there is only one problem left. This problem is the equality between men and women. In doing so, one has to overcome the norms in the Quran that gives women only half of the inheritance granted to men. The example of polygamy gives us a fair knowledge about the actual problem that underlies the relation between Islam and human rights. We could study human rights from a sociological perspective. The issue of human rights can be studied from a sociological perspective in the Muslim world, making use of violations and claims to rights as indicators and symptoms of social, religious and political conflicts. Moreover, this approach could also be used for other religions as well. We could also study the conditions of women in Catholicism or Jewish communities. This could help analyze the various types of socio-religious acts that are done in the name of human rights, claims or work for the gender equality in the religious fields. In fact, the issue of patriarchal legacy still exists in some religion that does not allow women to participate equally in religious function as men. We could also do a comparative study of Protestant and Catholic world by seeing from this perspective. We all know that the Hindu religion is based on stratification by caste or the jati system. According to this caste or the jati system, people are hierarchically placed in the social scale, with Brahmins at the top and untouchables or the Dalits at the base. It is evident that there is a difficulty in overcoming various forms of gender discrimination justified in religious grounds. The religious code does not allow intercaste marriage, as it is considered to be disobeying the supreme divine law. Those who have married outside their own caste are stigmatized as outcasts. Hence, in order to solve the issue, the Indian government has made special reservations for the lower castes. This has also resulted in religious conversions, as many of them also convert to Christianity that lacks such caste differentiations. In the Hindu religion, they are polarized and socially discriminated with little political and civil rights. They also follow their traditional occupations. Despite the Article 17 of the Indian Constitution, nothing has changed, and hence these lower castes have made their own little religious world with their own temples and rituals. In India, human rights is seen in both juridical or political and socio-religious perspective. There have been many socio-religious movements in Indian society today. This acts as a base from where religious sociology may try and understand the socio-religious conflicts, internal factions and tensions, and its contribution to cultural and social changes in the country. So, sociologically, when a certain rule present in the religious codes of any community is the opposite of the state law and the fundamental rights, conflict arises. Well, sociologists can only study the conflicts as it might help understand the changes underway in Europe and countries that are becoming multi-religious and multi-ethnic. Now, we have come to the end of our lecture. We have seen that in the sociology of religion, human rights is an object of sociological inquiry in multicultural and multi-religious countries for two reasons specially. Firstly, whenever we speak on the context of human rights, what we are doing is that we are actually studying one of the distinct contrasts in modern society, that is the individual freedom that modern society promises on one hand and respecting the existing universal ethical law by every individual of the society, that the society has a need to believe in the existence of a universal law and norms on the other. Secondly, the link between human rights and sociology of religion is consequential, as in human rights may act as an indicator of a conflict present through history, and this is a conflict of values concerning the divine will. So, with these lines, I conclude my lecture on the topic of religion and human rights. Thank you for being a part of the lecture. One more, thank you.